Well, good afternoon, everybody. In 488, finally back to some schedule that's normal again. We're on chapter 5 now. Um, Gonna give you some quick ideas about chapter 5 and how to integrate this into your write-ups. Okay. So chapter 5 is a little bit about competitive advantage, and it talks a little bit about the different strategies for competition. Gets into a basic overview of that. So that's what we're going to talk about as you do your case studies now in your recommendations. Um, Hopefully you've identified what the company's competitive strategy is, and you either agree with it or you don't, or you want it to be modified. That's what we're looking for in your future write-ups. So we're headed towards a more, we'll call it observational and inclusive write-up now that says, hey, I have a handle on strategic approaches and this is my thoughts on it. All right? Okay, so from this particular slide, you can see that there's, four basic strategies. Overall cost leadership, which is, that low cost provider, broad differentiation, a more focused market, and then a differentiated focus. Okay? I apologize for the background noise. It's Jax the Husky playing with his golf ball. But we'll try to get through that. Okay, so essentially the overall, cost leadership is based on like low pricing. There's several low pricing companies out there we can think of. Walmart comes to mind. Sam's Club comes to mind here. Online, you've got all kinds of different hubs, StubHub, etc., that are low-cost providers. Well, sort of the opposite of that, in a sense, is differentiation, which is not necessarily low cost, but we're using some element of our products, our business, our company to set us apart from our competitors. Okay, a focus strategy is exactly what it says. I mean, you're focused on a particular niche market. It could be medical beds, medical devices, medical intravenous devices. It could be orthopedic appliances. You're focused on a particular market. It could be geographic. It could be an age group. It just depends. But in general, it's a focus on something or some market segment. Okay, so here's some examples of a few of these strategies. Walmart, McDonald's, Sam's Club, like I said, cost leadership strategies. Kmart was one as well, but we know that they didn't quite make it. Differentiation, man, you got Apple, Oakley, Nike actually is a differentiator too, Target. Car companies are, Porsche, Ferrari, Mercedes, BMW. They're differentiators. Focus strategies are companies that are focused on a particular niche. The music industry, guitar manufacturers, they're focused on particular niches. Cars can have a particular focus by different product segmentation. So trucks go after a particular market. That's a focus. Your Mustangs, your Corvettes, that's a focus strategy over a particular buyer market. So you can't get confused about having them just be a company. They can be strategies within a company that focus on a particular segment of the buyer market. Okay, so what this slide here is showing is some of the earnings capabilities of these different market segments. I don't necessarily agree with this. Differentiated markets can give you really good payback if you've got the right product segments. Usually the one with the lowest payback is actually your low cost strategy. You've got to be really good at what you do to make money in that particular market. Okay, a couple notes about cost leadership. Hey, here's the thing. You've got to be real efficient. You have to know your costs on your products, your raw materials, overhead, what it is you're doing, anything. You have to be tight with all of it. You have to constantly be in check with it. Whatever raw materials you're buying, they have to be at the lowest possible price point you can get it at. And your selling points have to be there as well. So here's the thing about cost leadership. You need a lot of experience to get good at it. Sam Walton from Walmart didn't just start this and become good at it. He was at it for many years. So it's difficult. And like I said earlier, it's a difficult strategy to make a good profit at. And because the barriers to entry are actually low, anybody can do it. So just a further note on that low barriers of entry. I mean, to replicate what Walmart has today would be very difficult. But actually, the fact is if I wanted to create discount stores that are similar to Walmart, it wouldn't cost me much at all to do that. It's not difficult. But what Walmart has is great supplier networks and excellent buying power that I wouldn't have as a startup. Alright, so let's talk about differentiation for a minute. Now, this particular strategy is probably one of the most broadly used strategies, if not as a sole strategy, in part as a strategy. And what I mean by that is almost every company tries to be a little bit different than their competitor. Sets them apart. They're trying to fill gaps in the perceptual map, right? Okay, more on differentiation. So this whole cost parity relative to competitors. Look, if we have a good differentiation strategy and we have some unique core competencies, the sky's the limit on price. It's blue sky when it comes to pricing. Know that, all right? Take a look at these different features here: low defect rates, improved quality, accurate and responsive order processing, etc., etc., etc. If you are charging more for your product, whether you have a unique product, a unique core competency, you need to have your house in order when it comes to the functional silos of your business. That being said, there's a lot of companies out there that are differentiated based on being the only one that has this good, and their customer service is terrible, their coordination's horrible, but they get away with it because they're the only one that has it. We all know those companies. So how do the five forces reflect on a differentiation strategy? Well, real quickly, there's going to be higher barriers to entry because if we have unique things, technical or otherwise, they're going to cost more. Should provide higher margins, should provide less competitiveness, okay? Should create customer loyalty. Overall, should be better profit for us. So let's talk customer loyalty. Hey, what causes what here? I mean, this is what's key to note. But typically, if you've got a unique product, you're going to have loyal customers. Different car companies have loyal customers that'll be loyal to the day they die. And that's what happens when you create uniqueness and you create a differentiated brand. Well, it's not all rosy with differentiation. So sometimes you miss the mark. In other words, you want to be unique, but you're alone on an island all by yourself being unique. You either hit it or you didn't. You hit the sweet spot or you didn't. If you didn't hit the sweet spot of it, you're not going to make the profit you should have. It costs a lot of money to get there. So you have to have some money to pour out to get yourself differentiated. Alright, switching gears here, we're going to talk about focus. Okay, so again, we're focusing on a segment of people. We're focusing on a buyer group, a market, a customer market space. That's our premise here. We're going to get real good at doing what we do, and we're going to make this particular buyer group the most happiest on earth. That's the whole idea here. Alright, so a couple variants here, or different ways that we can do this, and there's actually more. One is cost. So we're going to be a low cost provider, and we're going to focus on this particular segment. Or we're going to be differentiated. We're going to do things in a very different way with some unique product or unique services, but we're going to focus on a particular market while we do it. That's the idea behind it. Okay, so how does Porter's strategy reflect against the focus? Well, focusing on a particular market can be higher cost in general because you don't have such large scale economies, so you lose some of those economies of scale. That's one particular issue here. We're going to create a product or a segment of products for a particular segment itself. That can be more costly, okay? However, doing that, there's a return. You could get higher margins from it if you hit it right, okay? If there's a hole in that particular buyer segment, you can hit it right. I did that with an online company. I sold online parts, components, and pieces for a particular motorcycle segment that was geared towards younger children for about 3 years. Started that company, sold it, made a little bit of money on it. It was a good company. There was absolutely nobody doing that at the time. It was an e-commerce business between 2000 and 2005, and it was a good opportunity for me. Those kind of focused niches that you can find can be profitable. Alright, so some of the pitfalls of focus. Well, the biggest one is it costs a lot. Secondly, if you miss it, you're losing it. It's hard to transfer a technology, a service, products to other market segments when you've been focused and you've been working on a particular market segment. So it can be very expensive. You better hit it right. Alright, so now we're looking at some combinations, low cost differentiation, which is really a pretty good combination because when we can go low cost and we can differentiate, well, that's like, having two big arrows in our quiver, because we're giving a significant, or at least perceived significant amount of value to the customer. You're offering something rare that's different and low cost. Okay, further to that, alright, we have just some different things that you can use in strategies here, alright. You can do full customs, you can do mass production. It just depends how you want to do it. It depends what industry you're in, depends on what product you're trying to provide or a service you're trying to provide. Okay, take a look at these and see how they may relate to some of your different case studies. Alright, how does this particular strategy go up against the Porter 5 forces? Well, much higher barriers of entry. However, when we're talking low cost, that's always an indicator that somebody can get in with some money. Think about that for a minute. Supposedly we can go with higher margins because we're differentiated and we're unique, right? Reduces buyer power because of fewer competitors, maybe. What's that mean? Well, when we're the only ones doing what we're doing in this particular industry, sometimes it creates power. So it just depends on what industry you're talking about, and there's other more advanced things that could come into play here. For example, buyers can decide to make and sell themselves. So you have to be careful. When we're talking low cost, the barriers in terms of cost can be actually low. All right. Okay, this example that the customer gives here, or the author, excuse me, gives here happens often. People stuck in the middle. They play both sides of it. And why is that? Because we're trying to maximize profit. So a lot of companies will do that. They'll differentiate a little, go down a little on cost, come back up on their costs, so their pricing, etc. They get caught in the middle, and it can be very confusing to everybody. All right, let's talk industry life cycles. Hey, you got to know where you're at in that life cycle to know how to approach it. Are you in the beginning, the infancy, the growth, the maturity, the decline? Are you scalloping the life cycle? What are you doing? You need to know that if you're going to set up a good strategy. So there's a couple different ways to look at it, and we're going to take a look at those. All right, so taking a little closer look, this is a pretty good chart actually, but let me just say this, that it's industry dependent. And why that's important here is because there's a thing that blankets all of this called risk. All right, so industries that are more mature or more risky, this tends to get a little bit more, we'll call it less informative. Okay, if you're going to participate in industries that are mature and concentrated, you have to really have a lot more information than just this particular table here. But it gives you, it does give you a start into understanding how this is approached by where you're at in the life cycle of a business or an industry. So let's take a real quick look at this. Hey, in the introduction phase, everything's new. We have no definition to anything. Price, cost, customers, market spaces, none of it. Strategies are ad hoc, sometimes written on bar napkins. But this is a beautiful place to be when you're first starting either a company or into an industry. I did it with e-commerce. It was awesome. Okay, the growth stage is where, all right, we get some competitors. We get a little bit of a definition here. This is a really good time to actually figure out where to sell. And I'll talk about that more later. This is where I sold 50ccparts.com. Is during the growth stage when there was still some money to be made, and I made some money on my way out. I made the most I could because not too long after that, it kind of died, and everybody had some form of e-commerce site positioned for the cycling industry, and it just drove prices way down. And so thankfully I dodged that bullet. All right, so on the maturity stage, this is where in a way we might peak on profit. We might peak on growth rates. So rates and ratios and percentages may peak out. That's what we mean by this. Doesn't mean that the industry's over. Doesn't mean that we haven't reached our total peak on sales revenues, but just the change over time, proportion and duration may peak out. The percentage of increases in incremental profit per time might peak out. So in some cases you'll see just these big swings of 25, 30, 50% increases in profit and sales per year. Well, that's during the growth stage. During the maturity stage, you just don't see that. And then it becomes a price compression, profit compression. Okay? Okay, so in the decline stage, there's a lot of different strategies, but I'm going to tell you one of my own that works. And it's called scalloping a life cycle, where we carve out more, we'll call it maturity in a particular industry. McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut, Little Caesars have all done this. How do we do it? We just keep adding value to the same product. and we try to sell it at the same as or higher price. Somehow we take out 7 to 10% of our cost and we build back in 7 to 10% of costs that may be another feature or another service item that adds value to it. This is called scalloping a life cycle. Okay, I want you to look at this particular slide here. Turnaround strategy. All right. Not many people in business call that a business strategy. They call it a reaction to significant loss of sales rather than market share. All right. But one of the things here that I want you to note is this selected market or product pruning. That is a wonderful way to lighten your burden, open up cash flow, open up space, open up ability to bring in new products, new innovations, new services that can be more appealing to your current customer base or a new customer base so that you can grow sales and grow profits. Selected market pruning